The UN is hopeful it could get fertiliser through the Strait of Hormuz within 7 days if it secures cooperation from Iran and the United States. Around a third of global fertiliser trade passes through the strait. But with shipping at a standstill, the UN is warning that 45 million people could be forced into food security. Jorge Moreira de Silva is the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations, and he is leading the UN's task force on the strait. I spoke to him earlier and started by asking how prepared the United Nations was for a crisis of this scale.
We know that the disruption of the Strait of Hormuz is creating massive impacts on energy, but somehow the impact on agriculture and critical elements of fertilizers have been somehow overlooked. And that's why the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has asked us to put in place a mechanism that could focus on fertilizers and to prevent what can be a massive humanitarian crisis.
Tell me about this corridor that the UN is working on to get fertilizer to the places where it's needed.
Well, 1/3 of all fertilizers in the world are coming from the Strait of Hormuz. So we knew at the beginning of the crisis that there was the risk of having some countries that are highly dependent of fertilizers from the region having an impact. Countries like Sudan, Somalia, South Sudan, Mozambique, Sri Lanka, those countries are high dependent from the fertilizers coming from the Gulf. But at the time, what we didn't know, and now we know, is that the entire fertilizer market is disrupted. Even the production in very distant places from the Gulf, in China, in India, in Turkey, in South Africa, in Morocco, because the shortage is not the shortage of fertilizers, it's also the shortage of the raw materials, ammonia, sulfur, urea, LNG, LPG, and therefore even those producers of fertilizers outside the Gulf are having shortage of the raw materials. So this is a massive disruption of the entire fertilizer market. As you know, in Australia, with your strong impact of agriculture in the economy, you know that fertilizers play a key role for the productivity of agriculture. And we know that without the agriculture being productive, its economic activities, we have the risk of food insecurity. And this is precisely what is alarming us. We know that the prices of fertilizers have jumped 50%, and in the case of urea, it's even 65%. So clearly, the risk of a massive food insecurity crisis is looming, and that's why we want to put in place, we are ready to put in place a mechanism to allow, even in the middle of the disruption, to allow the fertilizers to go through the Strait of Hormuz. This doesn't mean that we are giving up on a basic principle, which is the freedom of navigation. But the point is a different one. While we wait until a political deal that would finally restore the normality in the Strait of Hormuz, we have to front load all efforts to at least allow the fertilizers to go through the Strait of Hormuz. I used to say that we have a problem between the cycles, the diplomatic cycle and the nature cycle. The nature doesn't wait for diplomacy. Planting season cannot wait for diplomacy or for all outcomes in the negotiation. So we are trying with very extensive discussions with Iran, with Gulf countries, with the United States, but also with many, many other countries. We are trying to get the political deal, the political buy-in, so that UN can put in place a mechanism like this, which is a mechanism that is basically deconflicting, monitoring and verifying, tracking and reporting the vessels that come into the Gulf to pick the fertilizers, and the vessels as they go from the Strait of Hormuz.
Both Iran and the United States have attacked vessels in and near the Strait of Hormuz in the past week. You're leading the UN task force on the Strait. What's your plan to get fertiliser and humanitarian aid moving again? And how quickly are we talking? Could this be up and going within weeks? Is that the hope?
Let's be completely candid and blunt. We can't deliver on this mechanism if the parties in the conflict and the other parties that are affected by the conflict do not allocate to the UN this possibility. So we need the countries to clearly allow the UN to do its job. The second important condition is ensuring the deconfliction. We need a mechanism that ensures that when a vessel is cleared to enter the strait, that the parties in the conflict ensure the deconfliction so that there is no risk for the vessels to enter the strait and to pick the fertilizers, loading the cargo. How quick can we go? That was your question. And that's the only good news I would say on this. We are ready to put in place this mechanism. We would just need probably around 7 days between the moment the governments decide, okay, we agree, the UN, United Nations can manage this mechanism, can ensure that the fertilizers as a commodity can go through the Strait of Hormuz even during the conflict. We would need just 7 days to put the monitors on the ground. With my team, we already designed the mechanism. The mechanism is well designed. It's ready to go. So what are we missing? We are just missing the political buy-in.
Attacks by the United States or Iran are one thing, but if there are mines in the Strait, they don't discriminate whether it's a vessel carrying fertiliser or carrying oil. How are you going to deal with that? Well,
that's why I mentioned that as a key element of the mechanism is the deconfliction. And that's why we have conceived the mechanism in a way that the governments need to be part of the mechanism. They need to provide the deconfliction, to provide the safe routes for the passage of the vessel. So the mines are obviously a massive risk, and we count on the collaboration of the parties to ensure that the vessels can go safely through the Strait of Hormuz.
Jorge, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.